I don't even want to know this person's name, gender, age, any of that stuff. I want to purely know their merit and hire based on that skill set and their achievements that will be an asset to my business and will compensate well for that position. And I just want to be surprised by, oh, you're a whatever, Asian female, whatever it happens to be. That is kind of the approach that I would take with it. Welcome to the Kingspiration Podcast. This is the place where you'll learn how to get unstuck and gain momentum in your life and business. Each week, we tackle the real aspects of entrepreneurship, personal development, relationships, and fitness. I'm your co-host, Ethan King, from Atlanta, Georgia, USA, entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and best-selling author of Wealth Beyond Money.
And I'm your co-host, Justin King, no relation to Ethan, from Cape Town, South Africa, entrepreneur, speaker, and business growth strategist. Our journey crosses continents and cultures, sharing wisdom and experiences to propel you forward. Welcome to Kingspiration. Let's start the conversation.
So, Justin, in the U.S. right now, we have a new president picking his cabinet, and that's all good and fine. But there's a thing called DEI here. And it's a bit of a sensitive topic because the new administration is trying to really scale back and do away with DEI initiatives. And DEI technically stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So these are programs that have been designed to kind of give minorities a boost in the marketplace and companies when it comes to hiring practices and so forth. But now it's kind of seen as reverse discrimination to some. And then this negative term substitute acronym has come up where DEI means didn't earn it, where somebody says it's derogatory now to say, oh, that's the DEI hire. They only got the job because of the color of their skin or their upbringing, but they didn't really earn it. And there's a push for, we should hire based on merit. People should get in college based on merit. People should be chosen based on merit, which I fundamentally agree with. But then there are ramifications on both sides of it. And I know that you, coming from South Africa, also has a very vicious history of discrimination like the US. So I want to talk about that for a minute because, and not so much on the political side of it, but from a business standpoint, because I'm a person of color. And I know that means something different because in South Africa, when you guys say colored, that means a person of mixed race. Is that right?
Not exactly. So colored is a race in South Africa. Traditionally, historically, coming potentially from mixed race relationships, but also of our kind of West Coast area. So colored is an ethnicity in South Africa. So not a derogatory at all. A colored community, it would almost be like a Puerto Rican type look to a degree if you're trying to visualize what it is. Yeah.
Okay. And that was when I was there, that was a big aha moment for me. I did not know that. If you say the word colored in the United States, it is very offensive. It is an old Southern term that was used to put down anyone who wasn't white, primarily Black people. But, I don't want to keep this about race and religion. This is really about business. And I'll tell you why. It's because all the while coming along, I always wanted to prove that I run a great business, that I'm a great entrepreneur, and it doesn't have anything to do with the color of my skin. And I had a good friend of mine, actually, when we first met, he's been a friend of mine for over 10 years now. But when we first met, he was like, oh, you're a great African-American entrepreneur running a great African-American business. And I kind of thought to myself, like, why did he put that label on it? Like, no, I'm just a great entrepreneur. Like, I don't even need anyone to know the color of my skin when it comes to business. Judge me based on the merit of the business and how great your experience was. And the color of my skin shouldn't matter. So as I'm hearing all this DEI stuff come up, it's kind of stirring up those emotions. And I've always strived to be awesome, just purely based on merit. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, as you say, and it starts to take us away from a meritocracy to a degree. And I heard Elon Musk describe it as the DIE, diversity, inclusion, and equity, because he had a good laugh. He was calling it the die. So yes, a lot of people bring up will have some form of a negative connotation toward it, and the reason it becomes such a difficult topic, and I'll bring South Africa into it in a minute, is that if you have an opinion on it, similar to what we've chatted about before, if you have an opinion on it, people then feel that you're hating on a particular race because you've got an opinion on the DEI, or for us, it's broad-based economic empowerment is the word that gets used in order to bring people of color into businesses and to share what is historically being, and the term that gets thrown around globally is white privilege. I suppose that's what gets thrown around. So it is a tricky topic. I'll be honest, you mentioned the fact that colored is a derogatory term in the US. It's actually just speaking about ethnicities and color in general. As a white individual, I get nervous because I'm not too sure what I can and can't say, what will be received well, what won't be received well. It's quite a tricky topic to navigate in its entirety. So just getting back to the topic, though. So broad-based economic empowerment has been around for quite some time in South Africa. And the idea was to try and undo some of the wrongs of the past. That's the basics of it. Whether it's the right way to go about it, debatable. And we could get into the nuances of that. But what generally typically starts to happen is people look for ways to gamify this type of thing. Not gamify, game. And they look for loopholes. So it also, unfortunately, brings up and has in South Africa brought up a lot of animosity because we've got to do certain things to earn certain points. You get allocated points as a business owner for a BEE rating. So you'll get your BEE rating. And certain businesses, if you're not hitting a certain number of points, that you haven't got a particular rating, you just can't do business with some of the big corporates and
what are some of the things you have to do to get points?
It's how many people of color you have in your business, how many people of color in your business have equity in the business, and how much training are you doing for people of color. So there are all these things that come up. And then in order to be able to do business, as I say, with a lot of big companies and big corporates, they get awarded points for doing business. And likewise, you get awarded for doing business with other businesses that have higher BE ratings. So it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle. And it's difficult for small businesses with a small number of individuals to lose out on that fact. It's not always easy just to bring people of diversity into your business off the back if you can't find the right skill sets or whatever it may be. So there's a lot of it's quite tricky. But eventually what happens, you get to the point where in order to grow your business further, you almost have to give away 50% of it, 51% of it to this other individual, somebody else, get investors of color, whatever it may be in your business, in order to carry on and expanding it. And because of that fact, it obviously breeds some animosity, but then people also look for the loopholes and ways to get around it. So the principle of why it gets done, to empower individuals, I'm not too sure that it's the best way to go about it.
So you guys, your economic empowerment, your version of DTI is a lot more aggressive than what we have in the United States. Based on what you're telling me and other things that I've heard, it's required. Well, I guess it's not required. You just get really negatively impacted if you aren't diverse in leadership of the company.
Yeah, you get squeezed to a degree.
Okay.
And then you've eventually got to make that decision. Like, am I going to go that route, or am I willing to forego that potential business and just be steadfast in the type of business that I want to build? And I'm not speaking about, don't get me wrong, anybody listening, I'm not speaking about building a business that is white people only. That's not what I mean, but just the type of business that you're wanting to build. But we've had the same experience in our sports teams. So in order to try and get people of color coming through into our sports teams, they've been very aggressive quota allocations. And that becomes our negative word, where, and this is what I really feel sorry for people of color coming through in certain places, because that's the term that then gets thrown around. You spoke about it now, but they're just a quota player, or they're just making up the quotas in the business, or meaning they're not there on merit. And it must have been so hard and must still be so difficult for so many people of color and players, professional sportsmen of color, that even if they are there on merit, you're always going to get detractors who then just still throw this quota label around. So it's so tough. But yeah, we've experienced it in a lot of ways in South Africa. And as I say, sport has been a big part of it. And what is amazing though, And it's not down to the quota system, but we've got like our national rugby team now, the Springboks. It's just, it's so great seeing how representative it is of our nation, which is a rainbow nation, hence the color of our flags as well. We've got so many different types of people, and it's just so great to see that the country can get to that place where people are genuinely earning their place in those types of teams purely on merit, and make our international sports teams that much better because they are now able to participate. So,
two questions for you. Yeah, I know we need to land this plane. First question: if you imagine a seesaw, like at the playground that goes up and down, well, the scales have been tipped in history, and in favor of white people, where the people of color have been oppressed. Just that's a fact. We all know that. That's in the past. So these DEI or economic empowerment things are meant to tip the scales a little bit back in favor of people of color, so to catch up. But now it's still imbalanced because the seesaw goes up and down, and one side is up in the air and one side is down. At what point do you do away with the program? At what point do you say, okay, we're good now, we're even?
I suppose my answer is going to be cryptic. It's two wrongs don't make a right, because it does start getting to that point where somebody is feeling or is getting wronged right now. They are losing out on their opportunity based on merit in order to achieve something. So I'm all for equal opportunity, and I think that's how we need to fix this as best we can. And that's not even the right term. I don't want to say how do we fix it, but how do we make sure that we're always moving forward, always progressing, always making sure that people do have this. And it is we call it going to the grassroots in sports. That's where a lot of it has happened, is making sure that all the kids, and I mean, we've got such a huge wealth gap between the citizens of South Africa and our, just across class and across ethnicity and color and race. And what we've done in sport is try to go to the grassroots as much as we can to make sure that all those children who traditionally, because of the schools that they're going to, just would have no opportunity, have got the same opportunity as other kids that are going to wealthier schools do. It's certainly not perfect, but going to that grassroots and making sure that everyone has equal opportunity from there just makes such a difference when you go through all the years and you start getting to the age group representative sides and then the national teams. So for me, it's less about trying to take somebody who hasn't necessarily, it's not even actually about haven't earned it, because they might have worked their butts off and only been able to get to the certain level that they've got to because of whatever it may be, their situation. But they are then unfairly being thrown into a position which they're not necessarily prepared for. And then it doesn't look good for them. It doesn't look good for the process. It doesn't look good for DEI or whatever it may be. So how do we, instead of doing it at that point, when it's time to put somebody into a business or into a particular role within a business, how do we start scaling that back and say, in the grassroots of business, in the grassroots of school, how do we make sure that people there have equal opportunity, so that by the time we get to that level, then it's meritocracy, it's the best person for the job. Or if there's two people who are of equal caliber, then if that needs to be the tiebreaker, and maybe that's for the short term, I don't know, but maybe then that becomes the tiebreaker. Then we say, right, we try to move this and progress this in this direction, and the person of whatever needs to be placed. That's the tiebreaker. So it's complicated. It is complicated, but I just think of equal opportunity as early as possible, grassroots. If we can get that right, hopefully that makes all the difference when it gets to the late stage. Tricky subject, tricky topic, and I'm not an expert.
Right, and none of us are, and it is very complex. But they say, what's the quote? Small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, great minds discuss ideas. Something like that. I may have butchered that quote, and I don't know who said it, but ideas on how could we possibly attack this problem. And the big idea I have, and I wonder why this hasn't happened yet. Maybe you can poke holes in it. Maybe there's something I'm not thinking about. When someone applies for a job or for a college, university application, sports team, whatever, what if we just stripped away all contact information? There's no name on it. There's no photo. There's no address, other than, this person is in Cape Town or whatever the city is. But all you see on the application or the resume is the achievements, the skills, the merit on every application. Like, you don't know, and then once you decide, then you get the revealed that person's contact information. So that way, if we do it that way, then companies are hiring blindly, purely based on merit. And universities are making decisions purely based on merit. I mean, there can't be any type of information on there that would lead to any type of bias. I think that taking a step in that direction would make things more fair. But maybe there's something I'm not thinking about, because I'm like, why haven't they done this yet?
So 100% with you. I think that makes that part of the process more fair. Does it? I think that works as long as, if we go back to the point that I was making about grassroots, that we're getting something right at grassroots, so that the number of those nameless, faceless applications that come through, there's not an equal amount, but just we can never do one for one. And people that are wanting one for one in globally around the world are not going to get that right. But has everyone had equal opportunity to be able to reach what they can achieve and what should be achievable to everybody? Then I've got no problem with that. I think what the whole process is meant to do, it's meant to kind of obviously get more people into more businesses, more seats, and we want to see a more equal spread and share of color in the working in certain businesses. But again, I don't know if we went that route right now, are we just making sure that the equal opportunity? So in South Africa, if we didn't continue to make sure there was equal opportunity, and this isn't actually across race lines now, this is, for me, equal opportunity for South Africans, that across the different classes, because it's just so diverse. And that is white, black, whatever we want. We've got all manner of people are struggling in this country. And if we're not giving them the opportunity to get themselves out of that, they stay in that forever. If you are born into the slums, I'm going to call it, of South Africa generally, like, that's your future. Like, you stay there. You have kids young, and you have lots of kids because they are your retirement plan, because they're hopefully going to look after you. So it's like, how do we get them out? So what are those grassroots plans that we're putting in place for them, so that when there's a nameless, faceless application going through, we've given them an opportunity to win that race? Because if we don't give them an opportunity to grassroots, then they're definitely not going to win that race at that stage. So that's kind of the thought there. Where it stands, like in South Africa right now, and this is the tricky thing, is a lot of our job applications that get put out, it will say this is a broad-based economic empowerment position, or this is an a diversity and equity position, which it basically means if you're not a person of color, don't apply.
Right.
So
yeah.
It's tricky, and that leaves a bitter taste in people's mouths when we've got. I shared a screenshot with you the other day around the unemployment rates in South Africa currently, and it's terrifying.
32%. 32%.
But that's probably not even accurate. It's probably much closer to 40 or maybe more. So it's
wow.
It's just it's scary. And again, there's lots of people that have left the country because they just couldn't find work. We've got what we call the great brain drain, and that's a lot of really qualified people leaving the country because as these really qualified individuals, they can't find work because a lot of them are going to these are being unfairly allocated to people that are not quite at that level yet. So yeah, man, it's a tricky one. The knock-on effects are real. You can't always figure out exactly what all the knock-on effects are going to be. They're not always good. And as I was alluding to earlier, people generally try to find loopholes, and people have done that. They've given silent partners a share in their business, so they don't actually, just so that they can have their name and their face as part of the business, but they bring nothing to it. So it's and that's been abused in a lot of ways, both ways. People have been abused, being brought in as that silent partner because they had no idea what that actually meant. And so it's tricky, man. We could talk about it all day. It's a tricky subject.
Well, if I were to leave our listeners with a takeaway here, yeah, it's tough. And I would love to hear input from people. If you're listening to this, please, shoot us ideas. This is all about ideas in taking a step forward, because I think that there is a bright future. I tend to be optimistic, and I think the future can be bright we have to somehow get past. Unfortunately, in the history of our world, race has just been a major sore on humanity. And I wonder, I hope and I believe that we can someday evolve past that.
Yeah.
If you're an entrepreneur, a business owner listening to this, please find a way to strip away bias. I mean, even there's bias in AI, because bias has been in humanity and AI is trained on like all of the history of humanity. So if there's a way where you can strip it out, because naturally we do tend to gravitate towards people who are like us. That I think that's just a human thing for all races, genders to do. Like we kind of just subconsciously gravitate. So if you strip out anything where I don't even want to know this person's name, gender, age, any of that stuff. I want to purely know their merit and hire based on that skill set and their achievements that will be an asset to my business and will compensate well for that position. And I just want to be surprised by, oh, you're a whatever, Asian female, whatever it happens to be. That is kind of the approach that I would take with it. But do you have any personal thoughts or recommendations for our listeners?
So, two things. Off the back of what you just said, the huge bias is the familiarity effect, and that essentially can be summed up by you don't know what you like what you know, and we do. We gravitate to that which we know. So that's a big part of it. For any listeners, business owners, I think we've got to think long term about these solutions. So as soon as we get stuck in the thinking of how do I fix the outcome right now, is when the wheels start coming off in this regard. So it's really a case of thinking about providing, I'm going to go back to equal opportunity, not equal outcome. If we are fixated on equal outcome, I think that's a utopia that can never be achieved. Nothing is ever going to be perfectly one for one. But if we can make sure that we're doing everything we can, that there's equal opportunity, the cream will rise to the top, and that's what we want. And whether that's all of one type of whatever, if that's all the oranges that rise to the top, all the greens or whatever, amazing. As long as there was equal opportunity for everybody. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah. All right. Great. We'll end it there. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Ethan. Cheers.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Kingspiration. We hope this conversation sparked insights to ignite action in your life and business.
We're on this journey together, sharing our challenges and successes to help all of us take the next step towards building momentum and ultimately reaching our goals.
If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit and leave us a 5-star review.
And remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on our weekly conversations. Until next time, keep rolling, keep growing, and keep being inspired.